his wife M.K.I.N.A., impatient to seize by ruse what was not legally his. There is reason to believe that, having failed to achieve the son by his sister, and thus produce a legal contender for the Enlilship, and relied on his son Marduk. Indeed, when the ancient Near East was seized with great social and military upheavals at the beginning of the second millennium BC, Marduk was elevated in Babylon to the status of national god of Sumer and Akkad. Marduk was proclaimed king of the gods, replacing Enlil, and the other gods were required to pledge allegiance to him, and to come to reside in Babylon, where their activities could easily be supervised. This usurpation of the Enlilship long after the incident with Zu was accompanied by an extensive Babylonian effort to forge the ancient texts. The most important texts were rewritten and altered so as to make Marduk appear as the Lord of Heavens, the Creator, the Benefactor, the Hero, instead of Anu or Enlil, or even Ninurta. Among the texts altered was the tale of Zu, and according to the Babylonian version it was Marduk not Ninurta who fought Zu. In this version, Marduk boasted Ma'astmohil Zu, I have crushed the skull of the god Zu. Clearly, then, Zu could not have been Marduk, nor would it stand to reason that Enki, god of sciences, would have coached Ninurta regarding the choice and use of the successful weapons against his own son Marduk. Enki, to judge by his behavior as well as by his urging Ninurta to cut the throat of Zu, expected to gain from the fight, no matter who lost. The only logical conclusion is that Zu, too, was in some way a legal contender to the Enlilship. This suggests only one god, Nana, the firstborn of Enlil, by his official consort Enlil. For if Ninurta were eliminated, Nana would be in the unobstructed line of succession. Nana, short for Nanan-Ar, Bright One, has come down to us through the ages, better known by his Akkadian or Semitic name Sin. As firstborn of Enlil, he was granted sovereignty over Sumer's best-known city-state, the city. His temple there was called E.Gish.Nu.Gal, House of the Seat of the Throne. From that abode, Nana and his consort Tanai and Gal greatly conducted the affairs of the city and its people with great benevolence. The people of her reciprocated with great affection for their divine rulers, lovingly calling their god Father Nana and other affectionate nicknames. The prosperity of her was attributed by its people directly to Nana. Shulgi, the ruler of her by the god's grace, at the end of the 3rd millennium BC, described the house of Nana as a great stall filled with abundance, a bountiful place of bread offerings, where sheep multiplied and oxen were slaughtered, a place of sweet music, where the drum and timbrel sounded. Under the administration of its god protector Nana, became the granary of Sumer, the supplier of grains as well as of sheep and cattle to other temples elsewhere. A lamentation over the destruction of Ur informs us, in a negative way, of what Ur was like before its demise. In the granaries of Nana, there was no grain. The evening meals of the gods were suppressed, in their great dining halls, wine and honey ended. In his temple's lofty oven, oxen and sheep are not prepared. The home has ceased at Nana's great place of shackles, that house, where commands for the ox were shouted. Its silence is overwhelming, its grinding mortar and pestle liner. The offering boats carried no offerings, did not bring offering bread to Enlil and Nippur. Ur's river is empty, no barge moves on it, no foot trods its banks, long grasses grow there. Another lamentation, the wailing, the sheepfolds that have been delivered to the wind, the abandoned stables, the shepherds and herdsmen that were gone, is most unusual. It was not written by the people of Ur, but by the god Nana and his spouse Ningal themselves. These and other lamentations over the fall of Ur disclose the trauma of some unusual event. The Sumerian texts inform us that Nana and Ningal left the city before its demise became complete. It was a hasty departure, touchingly described. Nana, who loved his city, departed from the city. Sin, who loved her, no longer stayed in his house. Ningal, fleeing her city through enemy territory, hastily put on a garment, departed from her house. The fall of Ur and the exile of its gods have been depicted in the Lamentations as the results of a deliberate decision by Anu and Enlil. It was to the two of them that Nana appealed to call off the punishment. May Anu, the king of the gods, utter it is enough. May Enlil, the king of the lands, decree a favorable fate. Appealing directly to Enlil, Sin brought his suffering heart to his father, curtsied before Enlil, the father, who begot him, and begged him, O my father, who begot me, until when will you look inimically upon my atonement? Until when? On the oppressed heart that you have made flicker like a flame, please cast a friendly eye. Nowhere do the lamentations disclose the cause of Anu's and Enlil's wrath. But if Manu were Zu, the punishment would have justified his crime of usurpation. Was he Zu? He certainly could have been Zu, because Zu was in possession of some kind of flying machine, the bird in which he escaped and from which he fled in Urda. Sumerian psalms spoke in adoration of his boat of heaven. Father Anhar, Lord of Ur, whose glory in the sacred boat of heaven is, Lord, firstborn son of Enlil. When in the boat of heaven thou ascendest, thou art glorious. Enlil hath adorned thy hand with a scepter everlasting when over, in the sacred boat thou mountest. There is additional evidence. Mana's other name, Sin, derived from Suen, which was another way of pronouncing Z-U-N. The same complex meaning of a two-syllable word could be obtained by placing the syllables in any order: Z-U, in and Z-U-er, mirror words of each other. Mana slashed in as Z-U, and was none other than Z-U Lord Zu. It was he, we must conclude, who tried to seize the Enlil ship. We can now understand why, in spite of the age suggestion, the Lord Zu's sin was punished, not by execution, but by exile. Both Sumerian texts, as well as archaeological evidence, indicate that Sin and his spouse fled to Haran, the human city protected by several rivers and mountainous terrain. It is noteworthy that when Abraham's clan, led by his father Terah, left Ur, they also set their course to Haran, where they stayed for many years en route to the Promised Land. Though Ur remained for all time a city dedicated to Sin, Haran must have been his residence for a very long time, for it was made to resemble Ur, its temples, buildings, and streets, almost exactly. Andre Parrott Abraham at Suntip sums up the similarities by saying that there is every evidence that the cult of Haran was nothing but an exact replica of that of Ur. When the Temple of Sin at Haran, built and rebuilt over the millennia, was uncovered during excavations that lasted more than 50 years, the finds included two stellar memorial stone pillars on which a unique record was inscribed. It was a record dictated by Anunnaki, a high priestess of Sin, of how she prayed and planned for the return of Sin, for at some unknown prior time, Sin, the king of all the gods, became angry with his city and his temple and went up to heaven. That Sin, disgusted or despairing, just packed up and went up to heaven is corroborated by other inscriptions. These tell us that the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal retrieved from certain enemies a sacred cylinder seal of the costliest jasper, and had it improved by drawing upon it a picture of Sin. He further inscribed upon the sacred stone eulogy of Sin, and hung it around the neck of the image of Sin. That stone seal of Sin must have been a relic of olden times, for it is further stated that it is the one whose face had been damaged in those days, during the destruction wrought by the enemy. The high priestess, who was born during the reign of Ashurbanipal, is assumed to have been of royal blood herself. In her appeals to Sin, she proposed a practical deal: the restoration of his powers over his adversaries in return for helping her son Naban become ruler of Sumer and Akkad. Historical records confirm that in the year 555 BC, Naban, then commander of the Babylonian armies, was named by his fellow officers to the throne. In this he was stated to have been directly helped by Sin. It was, the inscriptions by Naban inform us, on the first day of his appearance, that Sin, using the weapon of Amy, was able to touch with a beam of light the skies, and crush the enemies down on earth, below. Neptune kept his mother's promise to the god. He rebuilt Sin's temple, the Hul house of great joy, and declared Sin to be supreme god. It was then that Sin was able to grasp in his hands the power of the Anu office, wield all the power of the Enlil office, take over the power of the Ea office, holding thus in his own hand all the heavenly powers. thus defeating the usurper Marduk, even capturing the powers of Marduk's father Ea, and assumed the title of Divine Crescent and established his reputation as the so-called Moon God. How could